Bienvenidos a Futuro Público, un podcast para profundizar el debate sobre innovación en el sector público. Bienvenidos a la miniserie GovTech Groundbreakers 2023, donde la tecnología se une con los gobiernos, una colaboración entre Futuro Público y Glass. Cada episodio es un coffee chat con un GovTech Groundbreaker 2023 para dar a conocer a la comunidad cómo desde sus roles fomentan la tecnología y la innovación para transformar el sector público.
Hola, yo soy Alberto Wurst.
Y yo, Ángela Galeano. Hoy tenemos un episodio muy especial porque, uno, vamos a salir de Latinoamérica y nos vamos a los países bálticos. Y dos, este episodio va a ser en inglés. Hoy vamos a conversar con Arūnė Matelytė, quien es la directora y cofundadora del GovTech Lab de Lituania. Hello, Arūnė.
Hey.
Hi, Arūnė. Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Today, then, we're with Arūnė Matelytė. She holds the role of manager and co-founder at the GovTech Lab within the innovation agency in Lithuania. She's a very inspiring public servant and maybe even a role model for many who would like to work for their countries and still contribute to a regional and a global perspective. So, as I was saying, Arūnė holds a remarkable journey in driving innovation in the public sector. And maybe could you share a pivotal moment or experience that inspired your dedication to GovTech in Lithuania?
Yeah, of course. So I think I wanted to work with a public sector in general and public sector social challenges for a while. But actually after university, I started working more with like consulting and startups and so on. But I'm working in both Madrid and in London. But there was an amazing opportunity to come back to Lithuania through this kind of talent program in Lithuania called Create Lithuania, where you come back to Lithuania for 1 year. It's a commitment only for 1 year, and you lead 2 different projects within Lithuania's public sector. So they're both trying to get more new people in the public sector, but also getting the diaspora that's living abroad back to Lithuania. And I saw this opportunity, and that's how I came back to Lithuania and joined the public sector at first. I started working more in like digital economy projects. But while I was doing that, me and my colleagues, started kind of recurrently seeing like there's so many interesting tech challenges in the public sector. And in general, very interesting challenges, both social, but also like from social perspective and from technological perspective. And similarly, there's so many new startups and companies being built, especially by the newer generations that really want to solve problems that are not just for another business, but that have really kind of big social impact. But these two worlds don't really like collide. Like there's, you have some hackathons and so on, but they're very one-off initiatives. So that's why through that Create Lithuania program, we kind of came up with a concept of having a team within Lithuania's public sector. Someone's fully responsible of actually connecting public sector and then connecting innovative companies, startups with each other to build new tech solutions or to try already existing ones in the market. Because we also wanted, we saw that there's already some, there's a lot of processes in corporate innovation, for instance. And we also see, many hackathons and one-off initiatives, but we wanted to really make it more systemic. So this is kind of how the GovTech Lab was born in Lithuania. And I think in Lithuania, although we've focused a lot on digital government since 2001 or 2, but at that point in 2019, I think it was one of the first times that we mentioned the word GovTech as such. It was still quite a new concept, but now it's very trendy after four more or less 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
That's super cool. And looking at your profile before, I was like, she must be part of this Create Lithuania program, because I had the chance to talk with 2 people running it. And it really hit, yeah, I don't know, you had kind of that profile, and I was wondering that. So I'm also really pleased to see how these program that's supposed to bring like this energy, drive, new vibes to Lithuania and the Lithuanian diaspora, it's really working, and a lot for GovTech now. So I think Alberto wants to ask you something right now.
Yeah, you were talking about the GovTech Lab, no? Which is like your
My baby.
your baby, yes. Yeah, within the GovTech Lab, you have this initiative, no? The GovTech Challenge series, which is pretty exciting. Could you tell us about maybe a specific challenge that stood out for you, and maybe also about a specific solution that also kind of sticked in your mind out of this?
Yeah, of course. So maybe just a few words around the GovTech Challenge series. So it's kind of an like open innovation program, but very structured one, which actually practically then connects the public sector challenge. We go from selecting problems in the public sector, we transform these problems into the challenges to the market, then look for companies, startups, their ideas, and then put both the private sector and the public sector into kind of one team and into the small accelerator to build like prototypes and MVPs to check, if their problem is even solvable with technology. And to make it more sustainable and systemic, we also found procurement methods to do it. So it's not like pro bono or just like grants. To have more skin in the game, it's actually like you run the procurement, you buy the innovation, you buy the process of innovation. So since 2019, when we started piloting it, we now had almost 100 different challenges. I think 96 or 97 to be precise. Yeah, we started at the beginning without any like funding or procurement, but of course we matured, iterated, and found a way to do it in a legal environment as well. But one of the, I think, the ones for us at one of the first iterations of challenge series, I think also kind of told us like why we want to do the program, because we started with some more maybe like economic challenges, or not necessarily like how to share the data between like different entities and so on. So it was important, but maybe it was not like touching your heart. But in actually second iteration, we had a challenge from our communications regulator authority, and they're responsible for safe internet in Lithuania. And they have this, basically they're responsible to make sure that there's no children abuse material online. And up till then, the process of how they checked if there is none, they have a hotline where people, if they see this kind of material, they can report it to the hotline, and then people need to check, review everything, like employees, and then if there is, they proceed to the police. But that's not a very pleasant task for anyone, neither for you don't want citizens looking for that kind of material. You also don't want to employees to be exposed, although it's their work, but it's not the kind of thing that you want to spend your days on. So we actually collaborated with Lithuanian startup called Oxy Labs, and they built this kind of web crawling solution that like built on AI as well to recognize this content automatically. And I think the interesting thing was it was both from social perspective, it felt that we can grasp so much more of this kind of content and make sure that children are protected online. But it also helps employees because they can, they don't need to look through that much material. So it was interesting case from social perspective, but also from technological perspective, because we had a case where they need to build an AI algorithm, but they cannot it was easier to find the same images that were found before because police had it, but they cannot give a material. It's illegal material, so you cannot give it to the algorithm to learn. So they needed to find like a workarounds, how you recognize like age, you recognize what's happening, the actions that are happening in the video or the photo. So I think it was interesting both in terms of like the social perspective and why it's important, but also sometimes you don't, when you start this kind of challenge, you don't think about that much, but then you realize, okay, like the police cannot give you all this illegal material because it's illegal, so you cannot really have it on your servers or whatever as a startup. So for us, that's been one of the cases from the first challenge series that we kind of see grow, and they continue to work together. But we had 96 of them, and they all are very each of them are like a small child to us that we try to nurture and help develop further.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And the specific case you mentioned, I think you can really see how complex things can be. You need to train this algorithm, but how are you going to train it if you cannot really just do it with the material? So yeah, it really illustrates well how the impact in society can have.
I think if we that very quickly, because it's also like you need to understand the complexity. But for instance, we had a challenge with one municipality of how they could automatically, so the these big animals often ruin the crops for farmers, and they get like government's insurance so that if it's ruined, they still get money for it, so it's not their kind of responsibility. And usually there was a person who needs to go there, measure everything, check if it's a specific animal, and so on. But you can easily do that with like satellite data and some algorithms. And the solution, like the prototype was built, it was working. But then you realize, like the municipality realized that actually we've written in the law that a person needs to go there and check. So like, you solve the tech part, but like then you also need to make sure that you're solving all the legal and procedural things around that. And sometimes, we try to, think about them beforehand, but I think it's okay if through experimentation, through piloting, you find that out later, because that's the point of, right, like experimenting and piloting and trying maybe a bit more ambitious projects and innovations, to find these things that maybe you didn't even think it's written in the law and so on. But you get to improve not only just technology, but your processes and how you're running the organizations as well.
Well, that's really fascinating. And it gives us a little bit of a good introduction to the next question, which is, as you know, very complex challenges, the procedural perspective, the legal perspective, the social perspective, the IT perspective. You know a lot about GovTech, and we'd like to ask you, what do you see as the key challenges and opportunities for GovTech innovation, not only in Lithuania, but also on an international scale?
I think, well, the boring answer would be procurement, but I'm not going to talk about that. I think everyone, there are ways around that. I think actually one of the biggest challenges for this, because we want to, with GovTech, we want to kind of, it's not just about the like government technology, right? And it's not just about that GovTech would be like built by startups or innovative companies. What we also want to change is that traditional kind of contractor-supply relationship where it's, I don't know, usually in technology project, it has been more like fighting and not building something together. So with GovTech, we're trying to shift a bit the focus where it's a bit more on like co-creation and like genuinely working together between the public sector and the startup. But it's still like, it's not that easy to change the ingrained kind of the culture of how you're maybe that have a bit of that, where you're on the different sides, and, trying to get the most of each other instead of building a long-term partnership. So I think this is still a challenge where with GovTech, we want to introduce a bit more collaboration, but how people are used to working through procurement, it's a bit more confrontation sometimes, and not thinking about long-term. And another challenge, I think, is that we don't want to also fall with GovTech into this kind of traditional outsourcing trap where it's like, you just outsource the problem to the market, and you don't leave any, you don't come out with it as a public sector with any skills and knowledge. So we're still finding it challenging if public sector organizations don't have any kind of digital employees working within them, and then cooperation between the startup that's speaking very, like developers language and so on, and you don't have people internally that can understand it and transfer that into organizations knowledge, that also can create like either mistrust or just not enough use, and you're not learning enough. You see the pilot, but you don't really grasp what that means. So I think these like things around now, like kind of ingrained culture, and then some skills, or we want to have adequate like similar levels in a way of skills, so that you can be as equal partners in this kind of partnership, public sector and startups. But that's sometimes not always the case. So I think these are two challenges, but other than that, like there's so many, like in terms of opportunities, we have so many different and interesting problems. You have so much money spent every year on procurement by governments, like globally. It doesn't matter like which government we're talking about, like both on technology at the moment, but I think increasingly it will be more and more on technology and innovation. And you see that these challenges, they repeat. Like, okay, maybe in some cases it's like very unique, but usually it's the same challenge. It's the same challenge of how you engage citizens in specific municipality. And there's so much potential of these more scalable products. And I think it's important that we see it not only as a benefit for startups so that they can build a business out of it and, sell it to different municipalities or governments. But I think governments need to understand that if you buy like a scalable product from a startup, you're basically for free getting them improving the product for the next 5-10 years, instead of you're just buying them for like 6 months and then that's it. They will be, if they want to sell it, they will be improving it, and you're then getting benefits of that as well. So I think it's very important to recognize that. And when sometimes public sector organizations really want something very tailored to them and only for them, and but I think it's important for them to recognize this opportunity. If there's people that want to build a product out of this, not just one-time service, I think that should be celebrated, and it's an amazing opportunity.
That's a solid win-win selling point.
Let's go back. I mean, now we're slowly finishing the session, but let's go back to the Lithuanian context. Let's say your home country. Would you say there are some particularities or some uniqueness about the GovTech ecosystem in Lithuania that, for example, other countries could learn from? Like you could somehow export these ideas? I don't know.
Yeah, I think, well, on the one hand, we actually we have one of the strictest interpretations of EU procurement law. So if we manage to do in Lithuania, other countries should be able to manage to do it in their countries. So maybe this is a hopeful message for them. I think what helped us a lot in Lithuania's case, and I think this is a case for maybe like newer democracies or smaller countries, is that you don't have that many kind of entrenched systems in place, or even like, that many traditions of how organizations work. And that makes it easier to introduce like new teams. But I imagine, if I was, because before coming back to Lithuania, I worked in UK. Like if I, in UK, I came up with the idea, let's build a GovTech Lab. They'd be like, yeah, okay, UK. I mean, like it's not that easy. Like there's so many, both the scale of people with like different ideas, but also how systemic, and like there's so many processes around everything and so on. And in smaller countries, it's a bit easier to, okay, if you have a good idea, find a bit of funding and try it out. So I think in smaller countries and maybe newer countries, it's they're a bit more open to kind of trying out new things. So I think that what makes it a bit maybe easier. But you have, I think in every country you balance this, right? Because then it makes it easier to start. But like, of course, we have then less resources compared to maybe countries like the UK, how much they can spend on procurement, on technology, on startups. So I think in every country, you're just balancing that. And the main thing if you want to start these kind of labs or teams within your country, is like understanding that where the balance within your country lies and what's the level of maturity. So for instance, before we started, we really liked how Scotland was running a similar program. But what they do, so we, for instance, we fund the challenges as well. And in their case, the public sector organizations were coming with their own funding to them for them to help. And we knew that in Lithuania, like none organization would want to spend their own money on experimenting. And, if maybe, we're not even going to get a solution at the end. So, we needed to adapt. We needed to find maybe it will take a bit more time at the beginning to create like additional funds and so on. But we really needed to adapt to the maturity and to like some specific maybe regulations of our country, but we're still using the same ideas, the same concepts, and the same kind of underlying principles of these like programs, or why you're engaging in this kind of open innovation processes. So I think that, it's a similar principles everywhere, just finding where that balance and the maturity kind of lies, but it can be adapted in any situation.
Pretty interesting, Arūnė. Like what you were mentioning about newer countries, I think applies to, for example, ex-Soviet countries, no? Like you got the opportunity to reinvent yourselves somehow. You don't have these historically depth-ingrained structures and things that like kind of allow you to be a bit more agile, I guess. Yeah, thank you so much, Arūnė.
No se olviden de que nos pueden ubicar en nuestra web futuropublico.org o en LinkedIn como Futuro Público. Recuerden que todos nuestros episodios los pueden escuchar en Spotify, YouTube, así como en demás plataformas digitales. Para conocer más sobre la comunidad GovTech Groundbreakers, entren a community.glass. Muchas gracias por escucharnos y hasta la próxima. Chao.